Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dumalang, Sanbonani, and I would say Koe Mora. I think, where's Dr. Engela? We need to get this multilingualism thing going quickly because there is some more training that's needed and development. I'm just trying to adjust this. I didn't realize I'm this short. And it is with pleasure to welcome you. And I think it's after such a long time we're seeing so many people together. And it's a pleasure to have you here this morning. Of course, it's for a good session, but also we got you away from your work, from your offices. You can sit here and relax. And where can you have a better Friday morning? Because after this, you can even get refreshments. So it's a fantastic Friday. You noticed during the week it was a bit cold, but this morning it's actually warm. And so it's a special weather that we ordered for you for this session. Now, today's session is for us to have our Vice-Chancellor here. And you know his first term finished on 31st March. Of course, it was still during the COVID period. We still have the COVID period anyway, but in the sort of the midst of that. And his new term started in April, on the 1st of April 2022. So what's going to happen today is he will share us with his reflections, insight on his first term in office, the achievements of the university, and the challenges experienced, and more importantly, what we need to know, what is our Vice-Chancellor's plans for his next term. Exciting thing, he did say to me there's a 20% salary increase coming up. I don't know if he's going to confirm that. But also joining him today is Ms. Leanne Manas. Now she's, and all of you should know because some of you during the COVID time when you're working from home, you're watching Morning Live, am I right? So she's a multiple award winning broadcast anchor of Morning Live. She's a master of ceremonies. She's a motivational speaker. She's a businesswoman. And of course, very importantly, she's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Goodwill Ambassador. More about her, of course, she's a very down-to-earth person. You'll hear it today. All-embracing person that engages with everybody, and you'll hear that now. So what I want to do first is welcome, on my left, our wonderful Vice-Chancellor, Prof Petersen. Prof Petersen, you want to come in? Let's welcome our Vice-Chancellor colleagues. And then from my right, the one and only star from the Morning Live show, Leanne Manas. Leanne. Please take a seat. Colleagues, I urge you to just make sure you keep your cell phones off. And of course, I'd be grateful that during this important session, that you stay in your seats. Unless you need to leave in a crisis, just leave very quietly. Leanne, thank you very much. You may be seated and welcome to us.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. I'm going to sit in a second because I'm that kind of person who's so used to standing to address an audience, and then I'll sit and get into my conversation. What a joy it is to be here. I am loving this. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. You know, the last time I was visiting, I've got many good relationships with Bloemfontein, just weird relationships, actually. It's kind of, the first time I ever did a skydive was in Bloemfontein. So, you know, you've taken me on the highest of highs, which was a skydive in Bloemfontein, and the lowest of lows, because the moment I landed was the moment I found out that Madiba had passed away. So, and it was that exact day. So this place will always be very much so etched in my heart. It's the same place as well where my former colleague, Boyambuli, passed away. So I always drive past that Mediclinic and it always sort of jumps into my memory. And it holds a very special place in my heart, it really does. And that's why when I was brought back here to have this conversation again with your amazing Vice-Chancellor, it's a wonderful opportunity for me to come back here and to just relive some very monumental moments in my life. But I just think today is a wonderful occasion to get to know the man behind the man. Don't you agree with me? I mean, yes, we want to talk about his achievements. Yes, we want to talk about how wonderful, you have been and everything. But my very first question to you is, Prof, why do you drive that car? I mean, I'm just asking. So we went for dinner last night, okay? And we go for dinner. And we walk out of the restaurant, and it's been such a nice moment. And now I'm getting a lift back with Prof Naidu. Prof Naidu is dropping me back at my hotel, and we walk to the cars. And now I see this one, and it's like, I thought this was an Uber driver. But it was your car. Are you very attached to that car?
Weren't you impressed with the car? Because it's a car that really kept its shape.
Kept its shape.
Over many years. So whether you bought it about 13 years ago,
yeah,
and you look at it now,
it's still the same.
It's still the same, and it can still stand next to a Rolls Royce, and you would say, goodness, was that manufactured a year ago?
That's a great question. I mean, it's a great answer. Because it was one of the, out of all of the things that's been plaguing me the whole night, that was it. I needed to ask. You sound like my husband. He drives the same car. He refuses to change his car, and he's so proud of the fact that he's still got the same car that's just
But
clocking.
I think if you get quality service,
yeah,
and there's a little bit of sentiment that goes with it,
yeah,
it makes it difficult just to get rid of it. So that's the reason why I really enjoy driving the car.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's it. So, and that is the answer I was expecting, because I've realized one thing about Prof Petersen is that nothing is done without immense thought. There is thought that goes into every step you make, every moment that you do, which is incredible, because I can imagine taking up this position as Vice-Chancellor at UFS didn't just happen. I mean, you must have thought this through and through and through and over and over and over. What was the clincher? What made you say, you know what, I'm going to take up this position?
Yes. So, no, you're absolutely correct, Leanne. One need to think about these life decisions very, very carefully. And so did I. And I thought to myself at that point that there was a lot of experience that I've picked up in different sectors of the South African economy and society. And I felt that the University of the Free State could actually use quite a bit of that experience at the place where they were at the point in 2017. We were in the midst of the Roads Must Fall and Fees Must Fall campaigns at that point. I was acting Vice-Chancellor at UCT during the Roads Must Fall, the Fees Must Fall, and gained a lot of experience in that. I understood the higher education dynamics quite well. And I felt that my experience in relationship with private sector industry, commerce, with government, at the international level, they all could assist to take the University of the Free State to the next level. There were micro issues in the university at that point, but there were also macro issues. And I felt that when this opportunity came, I'm not going to say as the two candidates for the Prime Minister's position in the UK say that I'm the right person, but I could say that I could have made a contribution at that point, and that to a certain extent influenced my decision to take up the VC position here at the University of the Free State.
So when you come in, and it's like finding that piece of paper where you kind of write down your top 5 goals of what you wanted to achieve in 2017, and here we sit in 2022, and 2017 and 2022 almost seem like light years away, because nobody anticipated what we would have gone through as a world, never mind as a country between these years. But we'll park that for a moment, because we are going to obviously talk about everything we've been through these years. But if you look back at those goals, those top goals that you really wanted to achieve, what were they? And how are we doing on those goals?
Yeah. So it's actually quite interesting, and I want to come in with an angle in responding to that question, because this is probably more conversation rather than an interview, so I can come in with the angle. You're not going to stop me there. But the important aspect for me was to understand what was the dynamics, what was the landscape of higher education in 2017. That's the macro environment. The micro I will get to, because that also was part of my goals. And strangely enough, because I was expecting this question, by the way, strangely enough, when I fast forward in 2022 and I look at the macro issues, not a lot have changed. Because in 2017, the macro issue in the higher education landscape was political of nature. There was a lot of political ferment. There were anger due to the fact that government didn't deliver. It was unemployment. And there was a sort of a disbelief in what could be delivered by government. And that's cascaded down into the youth. And the youth said, well, we needed to give government a wake-up call to a certain extent. And that was one of the primary drivers of the Fees Must Fall campaigns. Those Fees Must Fall campaigns was very much on issues such as free higher education, so free tuition, issues like decolonization, curriculum change, issues like institutional culture. We looked into issues of gender-based violence. Now, if you look at those issues are still relevant today. It was political identities, marginalization of particular political identities. So the macro level, that was the drive. And if I then sort of converts that to the micro level at the University of the Free State, they were also the issues that the University of the East of the Free State grappled with that point in time. What made it a little bit more emphasized or raised the profile within University of the Free State was that there were particular issues in the history of the university a few years ago that make those challenges even more pertinent. So for me, one of those key goals was to look at institutional culture. It was to look at provide some stability within the University of the Free State, but not just superficial stability that, coming back to the thought process, stability that is drive, but a full understanding of what are the issues that provide it. So for me, that was the second goal, to provide that stability. The third goal was to actually ensure that when you look at the University of the Free State, we also not only focus on transformation from a very narrow perspective. Often when we talk about transformation, it is about employment equity. But transformation is much broader than that. In fact, a university, and that is what the third goal was that I wanted to focus on, is not to talk about transformation as an end goal, but to transformation as a continuous journey. So you actually become a transforming university on a continuous basis. And that encompasses all aspects of what university is about. And I wanted to bring that across. But specifically, I wanted to make sure that the university becomes an entity or institution that starts to respond to what the needs of society is. And for me, that societal call is still an issue that universities globally grapple, but that was one of my key focus. And then finally, or just before I get to the final point, it was to ensure that the University of the Free State also becomes a high-performance institution. Because when you talk about excellence, which is by default accepted in a university, it's very easy to say we're driving towards excellence. It's very difficult to get to that point. Yeah. And for me, it was important that high performance, commitment, dedication is there. And then the final point was to do that in a way, and I called it a human-centered approach, to place the human being always in the center of that conversation. So therefore, my approach and my style would always to listen and to hear, because those are two different things, and then very much to get some inputs from diverse angles, because I always believe diversity, and that's diversity is a component of transformation, diversity is important because you get different views. So for me, it was important to instill a culture of hearing, listening, but not continuously doing anything, then to respond effectively to what is needed. So those, I would say, would be the goals that I had in the starting point in 2017.
Yeah, and I mean, let's have a look at that, because I mean, let's focus on the whole issue of the fees must fall, because that was a very vital point in the history of South Africa. And when we look back at that time, covering it, obviously we started seeing pockets developing all over the country. And then, it just kind of spread and spread and spread. Then we saw a whole movement within the actual ruling party. And then we saw the whole Zuma issue coming through. And somehow they all became tangled as one. And then we saw, I'll never forget, sitting at it was in Nasrec. It was just around about I think it was in 2018, when the announcement was made by the president that we were going to, the outgoing president, we were going to somehow find free higher education. Now that impacted universities in a very big way, and yet it was speaking to the heart of what students wanted, and yet universities were like, where are we going to find this money from? And this is a time that you were coming in. I mean, this was a very pivotal moment within universities. How did you handle that, and how are you still handling that? Because you've got students that are desperate to get into these institutions and further themselves, but it's not affordable. And it's living with that debt for the rest of your lives once you do sort of get that funding. Yeah. So let's talk to that, because that was also between politics and everything else entangled with university fees must fall, this changing, that changing. It's crazy, but perhaps you want to talk about that moment that it happened.
That is, and I think that sort of dates back a little bit also and overlaps with my time at the University of Cape Town.
Yeah.
I remember, so my birthday is on the 18th of October, and...
I'm the 14th.
Oh, okay.
So another Libran.
Absolutely.
Wow, okay, you got two Librans sitting over. Any other Libran? Yeah. So you guys understand that we don't know where we're going at the moment. This could go anywhere. This could go anywhere, okay.
But what was quite interesting, so at the University of Cape Town, and I want to use that as an intro. The philosophy that we had at that point was that was the University of Cape Town had the highest fees of every university, any of the 26 universities in South Africa. But the idea was that the fees were high, because the market could bear that. Students could pay, because the number of fee-paying students coming into UCT is actually quite high. Then the students that couldn't afford it, the students that paid that highest fees, we use those funds to subsidize the students that couldn't afford it. So if you enter the University of Cape Town, you wouldn't exclude it on the basis of finance, because that was our model. I think it was probably about that Friday, the Thursday, the Friday, there was this conference that the Department of Higher Education held in Durban. And the revolt of fees must fall came into place at that point. Adam Habib, it started at UCT, at Wits, actually. So over the weekend, I got the team, because I was acting Vice-Chancellor, got the team together, phoned Adam, and Adam said, well, Francis, fees must fall is going to come to UCT, because either start at UCT and then go to Wits, starting at Wits and come to UCT before you go to the...
Absolutely.
So I sat with our communication team and we crafted the communication to explain this model to our students more in detail. We sent it out on the Sunday. In fact, the lady that heads up the communication department also, but her birthday was also on the 18th. So we were two birthday people having our birthday party on Sunday on campus. But on the Monday morning, we had a group of students to come and see me. And these were, on that whole day, it probably moved to about 3,000 students at Bremner. Wow. And there was fees falling in Cape Town. So at UCT. So when I came here, I already had a lot of understanding of, with the drivers. But for me, it was important to make sure that government have an understanding where the funding would come from. And the point that we made to government, specifically through the Department of Education and Training, is the funding to fund that should not come from the funding that is allocated to universities through the block grant. So universities get funding through block grant, that is to run the universities. And you don't want to erode that. So in the early years, that funding politically was provided by government. But the challenge that we had is not the funding. The challenge was more the organization that needed to distribute the funding weren't capacitated because the announcement was just made by the former president. Yeah. There was no preparation. And the problem was the distribution. And that meant that the funding didn't get to the students, although the funding were there. So we needed to deal with disruptions, protest action, and we had a different strategy to deal with that. And we continue as a university to make sure that our relationship with NSFAS is at the highest level, is continuous, that we understand the needs of NSFAS, and the universities indicated where they could assist NSFAS to go through this. And it took NSFAS probably about four and a half years to get to a point where I think they can now manage the funds better. But now, the other challenge that arose is the fact that the funding has dried up. Because where our situation is in South Africa.
Absolutely.
So the funding that were available in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020 is now challenged by health, social development, infrastructure, in government, and government, now cabinet has to make choices. So to a certain extent, to answer your question, Leanne, I would say that in the initial part, it was more trying to see how we can assist NSFAS to make sure that the distribution is far better going to the students. And here I have to compliment our internal finance division, and Professor Nadi that introduced us is leading that group, but they had to work very hard to make sure that happened. We got a financial aid division to look into it. And then University South Africa that put continuous pressure on government to say, listen, we have to get the organization in order, but secondly, we have to come up with a sustainable model to fund post-school education. And for my sins, I last year was appointed deputy chair of that ministerial task team to look into that, and we have refined the model, but that myself and the chair of the MTT and the ministerial task team will have to present to cabinet between now and hopefully the leadership conference in December.
Fantastic, because this is at the heart of everything, and it's so important that we try and find that fine balancing act, because we are at a very difficult time financially. We really, really are, and we need to, however, we need to keep going forward. And we can't keep going backwards, and we can't stall, because this is where we need help. You did, however, write such an interesting piece, which I really enjoyed reading. It was, I think it was for News 24. You wrote a column, and you spoke about, what you kind of looked at violent protests at universities and how they transcend, perhaps maybe, that it isn't necessarily just what it is and it appears. There's so much more to it that there is. I mean, you write here saying that the recent spate of violent protests on some university campuses seem to transcend the boundaries of what can rightfully be termed as protest action, when students at something like the University of KwaZulu-Natal and Durban University of Technology cause severe physical damage and disrupt classes at the beginning of the year. And he is right when you're talking about the Chancellor, Professor Nana Poku, saying this kind of behavior is nothing but opportunistic criminality in the guise of a legitimate protest. So it's also important that we look, University of the Free State here, this particular campus, seems through the years to have, maintained a wonderful reputation when it comes to that. Obviously, there are pockets of protest action and things that go down, but there seems to be different universities that have a lot more of this going on. But what do you attribute that to? What do you think goes on and is at the heart of all of this?
Yeah. So protest action, our philosophy at the university is that we accept legitimate protests because that's one way of articulating the things that you're not happy with. And I think we need to be challenged in different ways, and so protest from that perspective is accepted at the University of the Free State. But I call it legitimate protest because there's for me 3 levels of protest. There are protests that are legitimate, so and that could come from students or from staff, where they are unhappy and they articulate that through a protest action. It's a peaceful protest, and people take note. Listen, this is the issues that this constituency is not happy with, and what are we doing? The second one is disruptive protest. So you have protests that come and the protest action disrupt the operations of the university, either your operations from a more physical perspective, finance, HR, infrastructure, and so on, or from your other operations, which is your academic operations. So classes are disrupted and so on. Now, that could be tolerated up to a certain level. Because people would argue that a protest that doesn't disrupt is not a protest. But you as the leader of the institution, I have to make sure, and my team, that we balance the rights of the people that want to be in class vis-a-vis the people that disrupt the class. And that's the balance. So I see there is a level of tolerance, and then once it exceeds that tolerance level, you then will have to act. And then you get a third type of protest, which is a protest that is violent, where you throw stones, you break windows,
Burn libraries.
you attack clinics, you burn things. Now that is violent protest that can't be accepted, and that is where the criminality comes in. Because I don't see whatever constituency represents that action, whether the students or the staff, they for me are criminals. Because you can't allow that. And the question is, how do you resolve that? And we had a situation at the University of Free State, one of our campuses, Kokwa campus, where we had a clinic that was burned down, and also an ICT laboratory. And I said that action has actually crossed the line into criminality.
Yeah.
But we act according to the processes that allow us to deal with criminality. But the question that a university should ask, why does this happen? That is what universities is about. They need to grapple and understand what are the reasons for that. And I've asked our deans in the faculties to say that the students, and that unfortunately came from the student constituency, every student on our campus belongs to a faculty because they would register for a qualification, a program. And the head of that faculty is the dean. And I want to understand from the deans, what are you going to do differently to what you are doing now to be able to understand why do you have this behavior? Because certainly if something crossed the line, you can't do the same as what you have done up until that point. It might not be your responsibility or your actions, but you need to understand your student in your faculty, you the owner. But as leadership, we also have to do something. And I say, because it's such a complex issue, it's an issue of the politics of students in terms of election towards student positions. It's a very, we will have a separate conversation around how does SRCs being composed, the influence of external politics, the fact that you have service delivery protests which are legitimate protests. But elements in that protest, opportunists, create different dimensions of that protest. And our students see that. And sometimes our students are caught into that. And that behavior is a behavior that complicates these sort of actions. And we decided we want to create an MBISO of all stakeholders. The Premier's office, our Mayor's office, municipality, our students obviously, staff, police commissioners. Try to understand, and not a chat shop, but try to understand what do we need to do differently. And that might be morphed up into a national level. Because the danger that I'm sort of looking at into these sort of situations is you can create a danger of entitlement. And then if that is, once that's been part and parcel of how this just evolve, it becomes very difficult to push that back. Absolutely. In a way. So it's a little bit more complicated, and we have got a very well thought out, well thought through consultative process of dealing with protest. Now, obviously, the people that experienced the protest action, which are in the audience, staff and students, they would experience in a different way, because they're just going to say, my class is disrupted. What is the executive doing around that? Or the students say, well, you're not listening to me, that's why I'm protesting. But you can never, ever try to explain through your action why something like a criminal action is where you're going to go to. Because there's nothing that really can support a criminal action. And remember, we are educating the leaders of tomorrow. And if you have those sort of attributes that is instilled, not by the university, but by the university allowing that to happen, those are the leaders that's going to lead us tomorrow. And where is that going to be disappearing? So somehow the university need to play that role, and I often say universities are social institutions, but they are institutions that are intersecting with these different parts of society in different ways. And we need to understand that. Can't have a big bang approach. You need to understand it, and then you need to provide initiatives, solutions that can deal with that individually, but also in an integrated way.
Love it. I mean, you end off the article, and I think this is an important point to close this off, because I mean, we could dominate the conversation completely by this, because this is a massive chapter in the book, I imagine, the book that will come out one day. But you end off with this article, and this really spoke to me, because I think that this is, at the end of the day, what you are here for, is the role of a university is, after all, not only to provide good workers and innovative thinkers for the job market. We need to cultivate good citizens who can make a meaningful difference to society. Teaching and encouraging mutual respect should be a vital part of any university curriculum. And that, for me, deserves an exclamation mark and a full stop. Because at the end of the day, that is what I want to look to from future leaders. Is that, yes, I think we need to demand and make change, but at the same time, not walk out of a university campus, as you said, with this feeling and this kind of like this, well, I deserve it, and this is kind of my, what was the word you used?
Entitlement.
Thank you, sorry, I've hit that word just disappeared out of my mind, a sense of entitlement. That, unfortunately, is a big problem, is that sense of entitlement. And I'm not sure that that is what we need right now running this country. And these are the people that are going to be running our country at the end of the day. Because I don't know what we're doing, if we're doing the right things right now, because if I look at the running of our country, which I'm not going to ask you your opinions on, but I think that we're losing the path in a very bad way. And the future leaders are coming from places like the University of the Free State. And these are the places where you need to instill these values into people.
So just the last point on that, because I know that you said we shouldn't, that this part dominate the conversation. But if you look at at the political, and I'm not going to go into the politics now, but if you look at the political scenario and the players that play into that, those are well-educated individuals. They've been at the university. So we will have to reflect on the levels of, on our curriculum, on the way that we teach, how we interact, where we want graduates that leave the university to be people that have got high integrity, people that could understand what it's about to operate in a fair society, and where the human-centered approach that I talked about earlier is fundamental to it. So you can't correlate somebody exiting the university with a qualification, well-educated, as somebody that's going to be a good leader, somebody that have got a fantastic value system. You can't make that correlation. And therefore, we need to reflect back on the university. How can we get closer to that correlation? And what should we be doing different? And we're running a competition at the moment in our law, well, not only the law faculty, it's actually across the university, where we ask the students, final year students and postgraduate students at the university, to come up with practical solutions. How do we deal with the issues of corruption in South Africa? Practical, not sort of just philosophical ways, practical solution. And it's actually funded and supported by a lot of NGOs outside, and some individuals in South Africa that feel that this is a fantastic initiative. It's part and parcel of making students more aware, but ask students to reflect a little bit more. And that's more that the university should be doing, is to provide solutions, but also use that as a way for students to reflect. And reflect in critical inquiry is fundamental to university.
All right, so we stop there and we go back to when you arrived here in the Free State. What was it like when you arrived here? Because this is the Free State, you're now living in Bloem, you bring in your wife with you, and Cheslin is your wife? Is she here today?
No, unfortunately not, yeah.
Not with us. Oh, pity. Okay. Curtis and Clayton, do they stay with you here?
No. They're in Cape Town.
They're in Cape Town.
They're already working. One is a chartered accountant and the other one is a lawyer. So,
well, look at that. So they're already
They're trying to earn their income. Yeah.
Exactly. It's time for them to get off the medical aid and earn their own income. What was it like for you, though, arriving here in Bloemfontein? Did it take you a while to adjust?
You know, Leanne, I can adjust very quickly to any environment.
Yeah.
But I think I have to probably sort of just indicate that if you come into an environment, you are immediately surrounded by people. So you interact much more freely, and there's a not necessarily a support base, but there's an interactive base. So you don't feel lonely.
Yeah.
So when my wife came in, she said, you know, it's the first time, now obviously I've been a few times in the Free State, but when she came the first time, when we already have accepted the offer, she said, you know, are we coming to the farm? Because that was her first impression as the plane comes into but in any case, I think she got used to the one thing about people in the Free State. Now I lived for 10 years in Johannesburg, as you know. I've been in Cape Town or in the Western Cape for quite a long time, and in the Free State, I can you know, honestly indicate that the people that I'm engaging across the board in the Free State is probably 2 levels up with the other provinces in terms of genuine sincerity.
Oh, that's
and I think we should give
nice.
Not that there aren't sincere and genuine people in Gauteng or in the Western Cape, but I think if I look at the percentage, so that helped, because if you engage, people let you feel at home. So Bloemfontein is my home now.
Yeah. So you support the Cheetahs?
Sorry?
You support the Cheetahs?
Yes, I do.
Huh? You guys are... You guys have got a very influential hand here, I can tell. You arrive here and you never leave the same person, I can tell.
I did talk about the transformative journey, no?
I can see. That's fantastic. I love it. So if we look back at the last 5 years, greatest challenge, and there've been a few. I mean, we've only dwelled on a few, but I mean, name the biggest challenge from 2017 that when you arrived at work that one day and it landed on your desk or it suddenly happened, you thought, oh, how am I going to deal with this?
Yeah.
Greatest challenge.
Yeah. So there are probably about 2 or 3. You said, because when I arrived at the University of the Free State.
This is such a Libran thing. It is so hard to choose one. So you take your bet and you say, I'll take 2, maybe 3, not 1. Okay, all right, I'll give it, because I'm your sister, I
but as a Libra, you understand that. So
I completely understand.
So when I arrived the first day, probably the second day, I had a group of protesters just outside the building where my office is. And there was something that we call provisional registration. So we are very pro-poor, have a very pro-poor approach in terms of how we engage with students, so very tolerant. So if you haven't paid your registration fee by a certain date, we will allow you to provisionally register, and then the balance that need to be paid would be paid on a later date. So I arrived, and my first day was the 1st of April. That was not an April Fool's joke, because physically could see
it just
the
happened to
there.
be that day.
So it was, and we dealt with that. We formalized it. But that was probably the whole issue of student finance, student protest, and we did talk about. So that was a major challenge. And how do you balance the expectation from staff that's not part of the protest and the protesters? So that was a massive challenge, and we dealt with that. The second challenge was also, strangely enough, something that came out of the Fees Must Fall campaign, and that was the insourcing of staff that was previously outsourced.
Yes.
Now, I led that project at UCT, so we were the first university that insourced probably about 1,800 workers. So I saw the process before, and I saw the process afterwards, and I could see that the expectations from insourcing is not necessarily what you would deliver if you have insourced those stuff. So that was a second challenge, and one of the major reasons why, if you put pressure on the institution to do something like that, some universities had, when they insourced, had an immediate 100 million rand ask in the budget, in the next budget cycle. Now, if you haven't planned for that, you're in dire straits.
Yeah.
And I knew that. And I needed to find a way to delay that. Because the previous administration has made a commitment for insourcing. I didn't want to step back, but I knew that from our finances, we weren't right to insource. And with the team, we delayed that up until last year. And so in that 3 years, we could plan, and we could make it so that we can still continue with paying salaries, paying increases, and doing the things that we need to do as a university. So that was for me a second challenge. The third challenge was really about, and that's a continuous challenge. It's very easy to talk about institutional culture, because it's like when you don't like something, the two functions in university that you can criticize, doesn't really matter how well they're doing, is communications, marketing, and HR.
Yeah.
And because you can pick anything, and they can say, well, they're not doing it right here, and that disregard all the good things that they are doing. Now, the same with institutional culture. There's also a lot of good things that we are doing, but there's also a lot of things that we need to do. And then there's a third thing, that is part of institutional culture and is not to become complacent. Because you could think that we've done X, we've got fantastic programs, and then a trigger event could happen, which meant that you might have gone into complacency. And therefore, institutional culture has been a challenge, a third challenge, and I did say to you 3. So those were for me the 3 biggest. There's obviously others, but those others we managed in a very well thought out process that it doesn't become. The one that sticks out, and I didn't want to put it as a challenge because we will probably have a separate conversation around that, is COVID-19.
That's where I'm leading.
And that will be the 4th one, but I didn't want to use that and not focusing on the
your
other
4th,
3.
exactly, your 4th. Listen, we like to balance out the scale because I really want to talk about the COVID-19 thing because, I saw how, just for instance, we all know what it was like. I mean, the whole world shut down, everything changed, nothing was the same. And I think we're still trying to get it back to where it was and hopefully not pick up some of the bad habits that we had before the COVID lockdown, but, to having to change this world as we know it. Suddenly, nobody was allowed in this room. Suddenly, the doors were shut. Nobody could come on campus. Everybody was forced to stay home. You had to suddenly go online. People, and I imagine students, a lot of students didn't have the capacity to go online and to attend lectures, and you had to find a way to balance all of that out. And I can imagine that is also a mammoth task that you had to deal with. Let's talk COVID-19.
Yeah. So I think the experience that we had COVID-19, so I want to go back a bit. When it started in Wuhan in 2019, December 2019, I was in the UK in January 2020. So the North were already grappling with, how are you gonna deal with it? And we were sort of tracking what was happening in China and also in the North. Global North. So when I got back to South Africa, I explained or indicated to our executive that we need to put forward a committee on COVID-19. And I took it to the Senate, to our Senate, and I said, I think we should form this COVID-19 committee, primarily populated by scientists, because I wanted to make sure that the information that is being communicated are the truth, and not a different version of the truth. And then also engaging with the National Institute of Communicable Diseases and so on. So that happened.
This was already in December 2019?
No, that was in January and February.
In February 2020. Okay,
But our first case in South Africa was on the 5th of March.
Yes.
So when that happened in KwaZulu-Natal, I immediately suggested that we form a special executive task team that I chairs. And that task team consists of about 5 or 6 subcommittees, sub-task teams. One focusing on teaching and learning, one focusing on research and internationalization, one focusing on staff morale, one focusing on risk and finance, the other one focusing on reintegration of staff and students, and then the last one focused on how would the university business model look like post-COVID? Because at that point, COVID didn't actually really start in South Africa, it was only the first case. And we did that. We did all of the analysis. We could take a revised budget to council in around May. We were, ourselves in WITS, were probably the early institutions that said that we're going to send our students back. Because in our engagement with the NICD, the National Institute of Communicable Diseases, in about early March, they said that we are now at the lower risk part. Because if you maintain your last concentration on campus, you're actually going to have a major problem with infections. So send them off campus. So and that was well before government announced the lockdown. And the revised budget that we took to council, I wanted to make sure that we sent a message to staff that you don't have to worry about losing jobs, about not getting a salary. We made savings. We decided this is we're going to save. We communicated that to the staff. So the staff were, for me, knew exactly where we were. And then since middle of March, up until now, we were running those special executive committees last year in 2020 and in 2021. We run it every week. We track student performance. And there's a center called Center for Teaching and Learning, and the head of that center is Professor Francois Stradom, and his task was to provide us where the students struggling, what is the take-up online. We looked at devices, all of those things. And our last committee that focused on the new business model could introduce things like a flexible HR policy that's now part and parcel of our university going forward. Our collaboration and co-creation, because that comes out of COVID, that have increased tremendously. The way that we look at risks, it was actually quite fascinating. In our risk philosophy, we actually ask our departments at the university to help us, and also with colleagues in the UK. We normally look at probability, and so what is the risk? You identify the risk. What is the impact and the probability of that risk? But what we have found that because of COVID-19, those risks could happen, all of them could happen simultaneously. It creates clusters of risks, which creates further impact. So where you have and Libras can think mathematically, where we have a y-axis and an x-axis, we have a third axis, because you look at risk in a three-dimensional way. And for that, we collaborate with institutions in the UK to understand that a little bit better. Now, so we take the COVID, try to address them through interventions, but also use that as a learning tool. Very proactive, try to be very proactive to make sure that your people, the business, the university is really about the people. It's the staff and the students, that they feel that there is an executive that is in control, understand it, and they could believe in them. Yeah. And that's really how we tackle that. So, not that there weren't any challenges, but we try to tackle it. We had our vaccination policy that we introduced. It was approved by council the end of last year, and I think that helped. We now lifted that, we suspended that, but the policy still remains. Yeah. So if the risk assessment indicates that there's a need to re-implement the policy, then we will do that. So there's a lot of things. It's part and parcel of managing COVID-19 to lower the risk, but also use that as a learning tool. And for me, that is what universities should be doing, because they are those institutions that differentiate themselves from other institutions as an institution that's always trying to look for new knowledge. We unfortunately, and we sad, that we also lost certain staff and students during that time, and that's always make an impact if you lose people of the family and the part of the university community. So we lost, and it's important for us also to recognize that it wasn't just plain sailing. There was also these negatives, but I do believe that it makes us stronger as an institution.
Yeah, it does, and you look back over that time, and it was a very, very tough time. But like we say, there are things that do come out of it that are positive, and I imagine, and which I have sort of seen, is that this allowed you to grow in a very different way as an institution. Because talk to me about that expansion, and I mean the whole international aspect of UFS and how that sort of catapulted it. Let's talk about that now.
So that probably will lead into where we're going as a university, going from here into the not too distant future. The one area that COVID accelerated has been technology. Yeah. So we've got a digitalization plan for the whole university, and we also have got a digital teaching and learning strategy, where the digitalization is not I wouldn't say an alternative to residential teaching and learning. and that I want to emphasize, is rather a mechanism to complement and enhance our residential teaching and learning model. So, and we have got a continuous approach in that, from face-to-face right to online learning, and all of the blended formats in between. But what COVID-19 have also accelerated is the way in which we look at internationalization. So collaboration has been a quite key, but I often emphasize that we need to talk beyond collaboration. We need to talk about co-creation. So we've got the ability to actually not necessarily send staff and students abroad, because they are, in the past, when you look at internationalization, physical mobility has driven that tremendously. Now we don't necessarily need that. It could still be ingredients of it, but we don't need it fully. So we need to see how we could develop programs, courses together with our international partners, whether in Europe, in the East, in the North, how we can do co-supervision. But also, how do we inform or complement knowledge in the global North from the global South? So we talked about right in the beginning about decolonization, but how does that pan out in curricula in the global North? Is there some ways in which could? So that part is for us quite important, and we're going to expand in our new strategy our outward focus to link more with the world on the continent, on other parts of the globe, but in a very strategic and focused manner. So, you know, I often say when we're looking at Africa engagement on the continent, there are 55 countries on the continent. We can't collaborate with all of them, but we can't force our researchers to collaborate with only one or two, because, you know, academic freedom is quite important in the context. But we could say, as an institution, where we're going to support institutionally is only going to be maybe these 3-4 countries, universities in those countries, so that we have a much more focused approach, so the impact becomes much more clearer. And we're going to shape that international strategy and also our outward strategy and what we're doing as a university on the basis of our sustainable development goals. Once again, there's 17 of those. We're not going to necessarily engage with all 17, but we surely are going to engage with the areas where we're strong in and where we believe we need to make a contribution. So for me, taking the university to the next level is going to be taking the University of the Free State from a foundation that we have built over the last 5 years. Foundation of hopefully solid institutional culture. We need to build on that further. Process and systems that we put in place. But also the high performance nature that I referred to earlier. So for me, Leanne, internationalization has to caterpillar us to the next level. And we're busy at the moment working on our new strategy. So in 2034, surely I won't be here by then, but in 2034, the University of the Free State is 130 years old.
Jeez.
And it was a good sort of point to work towards. And we're going to have probably 2 6-year strategies that's going to lead us there. So we're busy developing a Vision 130. And the Vision 130 is going to be sort of embedding what I just said, but they're also going to constitute very bold commitments. And commitments, you can't just make a commitment, you have to do something to make sure that you... So we said at the university, we want to be in the top tier of universities in South Africa in 2034. We want to reshape our students in terms of the number of students that we have at the university, but also in terms of the undergraduate, postgraduate split, and also in terms of the science, technology, engineering, and math component vis-a-vis the humanities and social sciences. We want to get that balance right. So it's going to be very, very bold statements. And we're busy at the moment finalizing that document for consultation, which in fact will start on the 1st of August through the university community for their comments as well. And that is, you might ask the question, why didn't we tackle that in 2017? I don't think we were ready to do that. We could, and if the councillor said to me, Francis, I want you to do that, I said, well, I probably can do that, but it would not be sustainable. It will be shifting desk chairs on the Titanic deck. Because what you could do is you can buy people in with talent, but those people might not be fitting into the culture.
Indeed.
And so on. So I think we're ready to do that. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time.
I think so too. Believe it or not, we've been going for an hour.
Oh.
I'm shocked out of my mind as well. I just looked at the time. So I just want to start sort of wrapping a little bit, if I can steal another 10 minutes maximum, because I want to get your vision for the future, because that's important. You know, you've touched on it a little bit. So we've spoken to your 5 years. Obviously, there is now, we don't know when or how long it'll be, but the expectation is possibly 2028 is where we'll still have you here until, but who knows, you know, anything in between there. We spoke about your goals that you wanted to achieve in the first 5 years, and it looked like you did a pretty good job as we sit here right now, but now there are greater challenges. You spoke to the internationalization and the expansion of the university and bringing it up to being one of the best universities in the country. What else are the visions that you have? Perhaps you can very briefly talk us through those.
Okay. So, Leanne, you know, the sort of micro challenges that I didn't get to when you talk about the 3, which I said 4 challenges earlier, there are 5 things that will have to be in place over the next year or 2 as part of our vision going forward. The one is we need to deal with employment equity. And employment equity in the context of diversity should be quite important, both for staff and for students. We have to look at the issue of, we call it a student life cycle. So we have moved a year or 2 on online applications, online registration. That's a space that we need to transform, and we know exactly what to do. But in the initial scoping of that, we thought we're going to do X, but the scope was probably not extensive enough. So we've done that, the scope now. We're busy with a project that will finish the end of 2023, and hopefully that will end of next year for that system to be hopefully 100% in place. But we monitor the progress of that. And the third one for me, it is about diversifying our income. So we call it the third income stream. We need to put more emphasis on that. So some of those things are critically important, and that we need to put in place. But in terms of the vision, I did talk already about where we want to be. We want to be a university from a student perspective. At the moment, we probably is a university where people would come if they're not necessarily successful in the top tier of universities in South Africa. I want to change that. I want to see that we become a selection university of our students coming into the system. So we need to get that right, and that will move into the whole issue of the boldness, and I did talk about that steps. For me, I want a university that is more globally recognized, and therefore our outward focus of a university is going to be emphasized. That's the global recognition. So we will be, and we started this year participating in global rankings. Our strategic alliances, our collaborations is much more focused, much more strategic. And then I think we must never forget that within the university, the whole aspect of social justice, of that humanity, human-centeredness, we want to ensure that whatever we do, that we carry that with us as a university. And for that, we need to ensure that that's embedded in our strategy going forward. And then we need to be able, and sort of key enablers to do that, would be to ensure that we have proper resourcing and proper systems to take us there. So it's a more outward-looking university, globally recognized for probably selective strengths that we've got at the undergraduate and postgraduate level, moving to the top tier of universities in South Africa and on the continent, having a very strong social justice element in that, and value diversity. You know, it's and one have to do it because my emphasis is very much on diversity. And I use the term diversity. So if you look at staff, we've done quite a lot at our support staff. We're struggling in our academic staff, so we need to look at that. At our students, we came from a predominantly white composition of students, and we now are more than 88% of our first years are black, African black. Now that's a lot, but if you're diverse, you also have to make sure that the other groups are also represented. And therefore, it's important to make sure that we've got mechanisms that we put in place to be able to ensure that the diversity of our student profile is also reflecting what we would like to see. Because we believe diversity is not only in terms of race, it's also intellectual diversity. So the decisions that we take is going to be, going to be uncomfortable for the institution, for its people or her people, because we're going to have more international faculty from the continent and from other parts, because that's intellectual diversity, which is important. And there's diversity in disabilities and so on. So we need to be very firm, and therefore the commitments that we're going to make in that new vision of an artwork, globally competitive university driven by our human-centered, diverse social justice approach is going to be quite crucial. And we need, as one of my colleagues said yesterday when we discussed Vision 130, said, Mr. VC, we need to have the courage of conviction to be able to see through the commitments that we're making in this. And that is what I'm going to ask from all of our staff and students when they have the opportunity to engage more to take us through on that trajectory.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I think your team has bought into this and they are ready to jump onto your coattails, and hopefully you'll pull them forward into this direction and get exactly what it is that you're dreaming of. And I mean, it's been a wonderful conversation to have with you, because if there's one thing that I picked up about you, I get scared of academics. I do. I don't know about you guys. Because to have a conversation with them is impossible, because they're sort of like level of intelligence, and they make you feel it, right? They make you feel it. It's like you say hello and that's where it ends. Like even when you ask them how they are, they lose you. But with you, you're so approachable. And I think that's so nice. And I think it's so important in an environment like this, where transformation and things have to take place, to be approachable, to have a policy where people can come up to you and talk to you. I think that is such a wonderful, wonderful aspect of your personality that shines through. And I'm glad that this university has that, because I think you're going to hold them in very good stead going forward. It's a great positive that you have. I don't know if you know that about yourself.
Well, you're telling me now. So
now you know. Now you know. You know what you need to open up, though, is a department of cook sisters and Malva pudding. Because apparently that's your favorite. You love those.
Yeah, a little bit of a cook sister, but more Malva pudding. And Malva pudding with custard and ice cream.
And custard and ice cream. Have you got a chef school here? Have we got that yet? Work on that. Work on that, yeah. But make sure that you've got no raisins and aubergines in that, because apparently you don't eat those.
No.
No, okay, all right. Listen, Prof, it's been an absolute dream chatting to you. My final question to you, and I can see Prof Naidu coming up here to wrap this all up, but I want you, because it's hard to talk about a legacy because you're not finished yet. You know, a legacy is when we see you walking out that door and you're not walking out the door anytime soon. And I've realized that because there's a long way to go. But you have walked out the door of many institutions, Mintech, Anglo, UCT, government departments. There've been a lot of them. What have you dreamt that your legacy that you left there was? And having said that, what is that legacy you want to leave behind?
Yeah. So legacy, you know, when I look at legacy, there's often legacies that are tangible and legacies that are intangible. So, you know, when I look back at Mintech, I think so I was fairly young when I started as vice president at Mintech, and for me there were two particular ones. I was involved in changing the strategy of the university of Mintech at that point. And to do that, I needed to form, as an innovative initiative, a mineral and energy group. I call it the Mineral and Energy G8, which consists of executive directors in all of those companies, CSR, Anglo, Sasol, Eskom, Mintech, Nexa, all of those. And the reason why I wanted to do that was to give Mintech an opportunity to engage with them on future work. But I couldn't say that to them. I sold a different value proposition, and that still exists. It's been chaired by the different executive directors for research in those organizations because they saw the value into that. And then another one at Mintech was the formation of the Advanced Metal Initiative for South Africa. And that's a national program that runs since when I left Mintech. It's still there. Wow. At UCT, there's probably two. The one I did talk about, leading the insourcing project, because it was the first one in South Africa. But I also established the Hasso-Plattner Design Thinking School, which was also the first one on the continent. They formally launched it. The opening of this new building is happening in October. Wow. But it's a massive school that's doing work right across the continent. And then I started a program called the Transformation of the Professoriate, which I brought here to the University of the Free State. So those are tangible things. University of the Free State, I certainly hope that the intangible part, it is the way to engage with one another. That for me, if that could be sort of cascading down, the human-centeredness, open to listen, to hear, not to block spaces to talk, even if you disagree. And then I think in a tangible one, there's one particular project. It's called the Interdisciplinary Center for Digital Futures, which combine the blurring of faculties with the presence of the other sectors of economy, as you've indicated, that are worked in, the private sector, industry, commerce, together with infusing the 4IR technologies and putting an emphasis on the human-centered approach. We put it in one pot because that's the future world of work. And this center, which is a postgraduate center, have already started, but we are busy designing a building that is a futuristic building that will bring, hopefully, people from industry across faculties to engage on social, complex issues. And hopefully, over time, that will filter back down in the undergraduate degrees so that our students at undergraduate level have the ability not only to think discipline, but to think across disciplines and have the ability to engage with people in other parts of the economy. That probably is the legacy that I would like to leave. Now, people would say, well, there's already one that probably already happened. When you were here, if you have looked very carefully, there was somebody that's standing in front of the main building, or the building in front. That was a monument of empty stone.
Yes.
And the legacy is not the relocation of that. The legacy, I would rather like people to understand the legacy of the process that we did in terms of the relocation of that empty stone to the War Museum. And that, for me, we haven't got time to unpack this, the process. It's a 1.5 year process, but it's a process that other countries now also, where they grapple with the issues of monuments and artifacts, that they also use to grapple and understand and come up with solutions. That is, for me, also a legacy. And hopefully we will generate more as we go along.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, Prof Petersen, thank you for your time and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
I think both of them need a round of applause. But let me start by saying to Prof Petersen, you've spoken like a true COFSI leader. You lived our saying, in veritate sapientia lux, and those of you who don't know what it means in truth is the light of wisdom. So you've lived that, and let us give him another round of applause. But VC, maybe I should add, may you live as long as, grow as old as and well as your car, to lead to lead this university admirably as you have done, and may you always compete and become the Rolls Royce for the UFS. So thank you very much for your response. Leanne, fantastic. Thank you very much. We have to get you back here. I know people want to take photos with you, but I want to tell them, don't go away. When the refreshments, she's going to come there. You're welcome. You will be able to take some photos. You won't charge for it. Because I noticed you're a businesswoman in your CV. And I should mention also that recently she received an award from the French government, am I right? Yep. And congratulations on that. But let me also thank Montello, who's our caterers for today, the Odeon team that has put this together. But more importantly, of course, Roystel Star Sounds, who captured all these videos and sounds so well. But Lasha and the team, the marketing and communication department, fantastic, and I think they all need a round of applause. But most importantly, it's the audience seated here today, because if you were not here today, nobody will be able to witness this historic event. So give yourself a round of applause. You've been a fantastic audience. Now, before you leave and join us for refreshments there, I'm going to ask Prof Petersen and Ms. Manas to exit through those doors, and you'll see them later during refreshments. And after they leave, then I would like you to leave. Thereafter, of course, you've got to go back to work. But the good thing is, the weekend is here. And as I always say, was our weekend. Thank you very much.